and Olivia is going to tackle the issue of ESG.
Yes, hello, thank you, Veronique. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was very interesting and I actually learned a lot. So I think we will maybe have to discuss about some synergy between AFR, which I'm going to present, and what the amazing work basically you have done. Let me just share my screen up. Here you go. So I have the subject of how to include animal welfare in the E of ESG, quite challenging subjects. First of all, I would like to just a bit introduce myself and the association Les Acteurs de la Finance Responsable, which is a very new association. We just have 1 year. Now we are gathering almost 200 members. And those members are individual people which basically are engaged for committed, I would say, for finance in conscience, which respects the nature and the human being. So the purpose of the association is basically to gather those people who want a finance which is responsible. Yes, I'm lucky I'm not the only one who wanted to do that. Then to inform about what could be a responsible finance, which take into account the nature and the people. Then to support professional people which are who are basically working within financial institution and would like to make their work evolve to integrate this new challenge. And then finally, we want to training people because we think that education is really like the foundation, and it's key for people to make choice with a conscious and they are doing. So today, we are going to tackle with this subject, which is not really common in finance. It's animal welfare. So just to start, I want to present some figures and I will explain why I present those figures. So most of them comes from the website L214, which is a very important French association. So I've narrowed those figures only to livestock and food, basically for people. So the situation in France is we have more than 170,000 farms and we have 960 slaughterhouses. 80% of them are living in intensive livestock farms. 3.2 million farmed animals are slaughtered in France every day, and 60% are chicken. In Europe, in 2015, almost 1 billion fish were raised in cage in Europe. And worldwide, in 2019, more than 80 billion animals, terrestrial animals, and then more 300 billion aquatic animals were involved in farming and slaughter activities worldwide. So why do I give you those figures? It's just to illustrate that we are basically quite far today to be in a vegan world where we won't basically kill animals to feed us. And this is for me to illustrate that even if we are not at this stage of being vegan world, we have still some responsibilities towards animals, which could basically include welfare and how we can treat them well and better. So I think it's two steps. We couldn't ignore the first step, which is the transition step, which basically will include how we could respect the life of those animals. And here, just for the illustration, I love this citation, I don't remember the word, that slaughterhouse, if slaughterhouses had glass wall, everyone would be vegetarian, by Sir Paul McCartney. So what is basically animal welfare? So for me, it's basically a notion which is quite subjective, I will say, in my opinion. The only things for me which is quite important is that the responsibility we have towards the animal to respect its life. Anyway, I went to see in France the definition like the minister can give to this welfare. What does it mean and how we can assess it? So they gave 5 points of absence of hunger, absence of fear and distress, absence of physical or thermal stress, freedom from pain, injury, and disease, and freedom to express normal behavior for its species. This one is very important, but we'll come back a bit later to it. So when I tell you all this, now how finance can be a major player on the animal welfare, how financial institution could take into account this criteria, this notion, to make a responsible finance. Because as I haven't mentioned, but we are in finance, they use this E as environment, but some people will include in the E animals, some won't. In the association, for example, we said in respect of man, human, and nature with a capital N, and we included the animals in this nature environment. But some of them will probably won't. So we'll see a bit. So as I think everyone mentioned a bit earlier, we have those 3 acronyms, which is ESG, environment, social, and governance. This creates grids, which indicators. So exactly what Van Dien was actually explaining. He explained these indicators of what could be used by this financial institution to include them in their grid in the E environments. Here I put you, for example, it's a screenshot from a guide which was written by the AFG. It's a very famous and important French association which gathered all the asset manager in France. This association wrote a guide which described what kind of indicators could be included in the environment, in the E of the ESG. Here, in these different thematics, so they put that it was the mandatory one. You can see climate with carbon footprint. You can see water, energy, biodiversity, and waste. But what we cannot see is anything regarding animal welfare or good treatment or anything related to it. Second example I wanted to show, it's animal welfare, animal or veganism. It's not included in thematic approach. Here, it's a survey which has been done in September 2020 by Vigeo and the FIR. Same, it's a very important organization in finance, which basically promotes quite responsible finance. And they made this survey. They interviewed 100 savers, so people who had money and wanted to invest in projects. And they were asking them what would be the most important thematic for them to invest, which one was the most responsible and important. Here we can see 13 thematics as pollution, human rights, climate change, well-being at work, biodiversity, poverty, but again, nothing about animal welfare or veganism. However, what is quite questioning is 70% of organic food consumers say that animal welfare is very important for them, and it will base their purchase on these criteria. And when we see, as in France, because I just have those numbers in France, I haven't checked worldwide, but I think earlier someone spoke about those figures. There is a strong strength that the consumption of organical products increased in 20% since 2016. So here to illustrate that, on the side, which in the financial world, we don't talk about these subjects, and the other side, the consumers, people, they are taking more, they are more conscious, and they are, pay more attention as this criteria. So it doesn't really match sometimes. Two words sometimes don't speak. Then, so you see, like, in the field of livestock farming, so same. Just to give you an overview, in France, there is 4,417 intensive livestock farming. And what does represent basically for an animal to be in this kind of livestock farming is 22 chicken per meters square, 15 ducks per meter square, and so on and so on. So what does it mean? When there is animal which are raised in this kind of intensive livestock farming, it's not compatible at all with animal well-being. So why I'm talking again about this? Why those livestock farming exist? It exists for one thing, profits and rentability. And why that? Because when we talk about finance, we don't have to forget about something. Finance means profits means rentability. So now we have to consider this as a fact. We can change the mentality by lobbying that we couldn't expect more profitability, like sometimes we expect 10%, 15%, so this level, we can try to narrow it down, but it still has to exist. So that's why everything that this livestock farming came into the market, it was to increase this rentability and this economic model. Here, give you some little illustration at what is a livestock farming. Here on the left, don't know, on the right, where you see the car, it's just a picture, an extract of what are the conditions of the animals living in this parc d'engraissement in the North America. I don't know if you've seen the movie Kiss the Ground on Netflix, a very well document which explains how this business works and how as well this is really nefast for the environment. On the other side, you see like the milk, the cow milk, dairy milk, and it was a very controversial project in France called the using of the 1,000 cows, and it was really like a big subject where you had people on the streets where basically were against this project, and finally this farm closed beginning of the year because they were not respecting all the mandatory things they had to put in place to perform their activity. So here I put you like, we are far from basically what we could expect. This is basically what we could represent as animal welfare in the middle of the nature. And what I just showed is quite different. So when we see all that, when we see the figures, then we understand what is behind the production of animals, why is here, because we are just searching for rentability. On the same time, we see that in financial environments, we don't really care about animal welfare. We don't take it into consideration. But what do we take in consideration? In the E of ESG, the environmental aspects, is climate change. I've just talked about it, and I'll show you that it was included in the grid. and also biodiversity and pollutions. But in the meantime, when you just step back a bit and you look at the livestock farming, what we can notice is livestock farming is 40.5% of the green gas emission, same as the transport sector. Water pollution, we talk about it, I think, since the beginning of the seminar. Deforestation, same, 60% of deforestation, impact on biodiversity, and so on, and so on, and so on. So here, my message, basically for the financial institution, which like communicates about the fact they want to be more responsible in the way they invest, that they want stop financing activities which is against climate change. My message will be, we should be careful of the investments you are doing in the activity of the animal sector, and especially in the livestock farmings. So first leverage, we could see, stop financing or investing in company which contribute directly or indirectly to intensive livestock farming. And I think, Vandine, what you just presented as these indicators where you were basically scoring those companies in this regards is really interesting. And I don't think I've seen a lot of things this way, so it will help a lot. For just an example, the World Bank and the EBRD have just invested massively 2.3 billion in mega farms and industrial meat and dairy sectors. You have to understand they communicate that they are respectful of the environment and they are trying to have a very ESG policy. So same, I don't think it's really the good message when you invest so much in this kind of projects. Leverage 2, as investors, you have shares. So when you have shares, you have the power basically to vote and to put some pressure within this institution. So I know it's a bit of fashion lately in the fossil companies like Total, all the shareholders, they put this kind of resolutions, they say it on by climate, where basically you request the company to give you the action plan on the reduction of the carbon footprint. When you are a shareholder or investors in this company which are doing some mistreatment on animals who basically don't really take care about animal welfare or even against with some things, you could act the same way as we do for the gas and oil industry. We could request that they should improve the living conditions for animals. They can request to use slaughter activity more respectful, stopping intensive and livestock farming, and being careful as well of animal food supply chain. So here, financial institution, you can have basically two attitudes. You could as well try to exclude livestock farmings or other activity which harms animals from your investment. Or also, you could decide that to stay here, but to have this kind of lobbying pressure within those companies. And then the leverage 3 is going beyond, and what we show is direct financial flow to animal welfare or vegan projects. Here, I then illustrated some example where we could merge the notion of being respectful to the animals and in the same time being profitable and have some good return. First example, it's InnovaFeed. So InnovaFeed is a French firm, which is a private fund, Alter Equity, invested in this company, and the rentability was 400% of the investment. So this is a very quite good example. So Alter Equity, for example, is an asset manager, private one, which decided, it's been 15 years ago, to invest only in projects which be ESG, but very like in the best integrity of the E and the S and the G, and then support and assist the company in their evolution. So InnovaFeed, it's a good example. In the meantime, it goes on and helps animal health and the alternative foods, because chicken, fish can be fed with insects instead of fish. So it had like a double good effect. First one, it's to provide more food quality to animals, and second one, to reduce the impact on the animals. Another example, the slaughter technique, which is quite interesting. Just to give you a bit an overview, so 300 million male chicks are killed each year in the European Union, and at least 45 million in France are gas or crush. There is a company which basically a few years ago started to think about the process of how to avoid crushing and gassing all those poor little chicks. And they found a technology that could basically avoid this by selecting, you could see in the egg if it's a female or a male. And then you don't have to go through the chicken process. They are born and then you kill them. And so a few years started by their own. And then afterwards, the agriculture minister, they communicate that they would take a law that will end the crushing of male chick by the end of 2021. So if you can imagine, people who invested in this select egg process, now that it will be mandatory by a law, it means that every farms will have to invest into these kinds of products. So same, the market will go bigger, and then the investment and the profits will be the same. Meat alternative, we already spoke about it, but to give you like financial figures for financial people, in 2020, this niche market was represented $13 billion, and the expectation for 2027, it's to go to $36 billion. So it shows for people who want institutional people who wants to invest in this market, it just shows that the profits will be there, and the croissance will be there as well. The growth will be there as well. And then fashion, I wanted to show this last example. It's a French company, same, called Minuit sur Terre, which created alternative to animal leather by creating this vegan leather, which comes from grape-based, from grape. And basically, what's it? This is recycled materials which are transformed as a kind of past. And this past is just rolls of cream-colored vegetables. So here is to show that, and I put you some pictures of it to show that it's a really nice shoes, and it's come from vegetables, fruits, and not animals. And same for give you a bit of color from a financial perspective. This company started by crowdfunding, and they raised 40,000 euros. It was 2 years ago. 2020, they published that they will have a project turnover of 1.2 million. So from 40,000, they could raise it to 1.2 million. So just to illustrate that, same, there is plenty of room to invest in this kind of innovation, and there is a market and there is people who want, and for investors it's quite profitable and rentable. So to sum up a little bit what financial industry should do, so include animal welfare as environmental indicators, include animal welfare / veganism as investment theme, have a policy of exclusion in the same way as the fossil fuels who contribute to the direct or indirect industrialization, and directing available financial flows towards financing or investments in innovative sectors as slaughter techniques, textile, food, and alternatives. So it's a lot to do, and plenty of things to just communicate and inform people, and here we go. Any question?
I'd like to make a comment if I could, Olivia. And firstly, just to thank you for that presentation, because I found it really informative and helpful. But and I really like the quote from Paul McCartney. You know, he's talking about glass walls for the slaughterhouse, but I think we need glass walls for the whole of the factory process, because the animal welfare that you're talking about is not just in the slaughterhouse, as you point out. And so how do we get glass walls? I think it's got to be that the information that goes to the shareholders, investors, and society is more focused on animal welfare than it is at the moment. And that wouldn't be too hard to do, because there's no focus at all at the moment, absolutely no focus on animal welfare. But if we had parameters in order to measure the 5 freedoms, and if corporations law required that to be reported, then that will bring glass walls to the farm, the factory farm. So I think, if I can be a little bit provocative, I'm just not sure whether your presentation grasps the genesis of the problem, which is the accounting system. Mind you, I'm a professor of accounting, so you know I see it only through the world in my eyes. But this is fundamental to getting information to society and to shareholders. Anyway, just throwing 2 cents into the pond.
I agree with you. The only thing is I've narrowed the illustration on the livestock farming and the fact just for alimentation, because I think it's the most easy to find information as well, and which actually illustrates quite well, first of all, the impact on the environment, and then on the why they created this model, because it's just a research of rentability for financing and for shareholders, basically, of those companies. So I agree, this is, when we are talking about animal welfare, it's bigger than what I just presented. But then when you are talking to financial people, then you need as well to find example which illustrates and talk to them. And this is industry, which is the one, like, we can talk about the leather one as well, but this is quite controversial and it's not as big as the food, basically, and what we are doing just to feed ourselves. So that's why I decided just to focus on that.
Well, hello, I have a question too. Why do you feed intensive breeding with intensive insect breeding? Is it make a sense?
Does it make a sense for insects anyway? You have to breed those animals to feed them. So either like you decide to feed them with other animals or to try to find another alternative, and as well, like the insect part, it's less consuming in terms of energy and water. So it just had to reduce as well the impacts of how you provide the food and the supply chain. And it's more recommended as well if you want to feed fish, to feed them with insects than fish themselves, because the fish in the nature doesn't eat the fish. So this is it. The best way was just not eating the fish at all, but as we still eat, trying to just improve this supply chain. I think it's why they choose insects.
Other questions? Other questions for Olivia? I think.
Hi there.
Yes.
Just one quick question. Are there any specific transition proposals submitted to governments or financial institutions to help farm factories to change their business activities to another sector if they choose so and still make a livelihood?
Sorry, can you repeat? I don't really understand the question.
Yes, if you as an organization have submitted any specific proposals to governments or financial institutions to change those persons that want no longer to be on farm factories businesses.
I see. Okay, I see your point. It's like, for example, the fossil sector, they have the renewable energy, which basically will help to go to the transition. And just your meaning that for the farm factories, they don't have this kind of transition model, but where they could go? Is it your question, basically?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it's a good question, but I think earlier we had a very good presentation about the plant-based market, which shows basically how this market is unexploited. And I think this farm now, they would just have to rethink as well the business model. And one important part, I think, is how now the consumer will be okay to pay a higher price for what is eating. The problem with this industry now is the cost is so low and the price they are selling the food is so low. That's why you need to produce that much quantity to get certain rentability. But then if you change the model and then you reduce the consumption and then you higher the price, then you can go to a transition by reducing your activity, but having still the same business model and same financial at the end. But as well, government, I think they should be involved with the subvention and with other, incentive things they could do. Because if we are basically all against the climate change, it will have anyway to go through the reduction of this farm factory. So I think after at some point it will be as well a government issue.
Very well, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you very much. Other questions? No?
I just would like to complete it's not a question for Olivia, just to complete the answer or to give another information. If I understood your question, yeah, it's did governments have implemented any measures for animal welfare from one side, and when you have another side of ESG it's for responsible finance. Is there any frame that has included this animal related criteria for investment decision? Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct.
Okay, so to answer to you for the first part, yeah, of course, you have governments that have included ESG criteria to improve the life of animals. Just you have very famous examples of for hens and chickens. They must have at least one size of an A4 paper to live in. So that's one point. And just for the investment part, I would like to share with you my screen. Now, just I go on the Vegan Finance website. So you have in the US and in the Europe and in other parts of the world, but I may don't know. But for instance, maybe you know the SASB is about the system. It means the sustainability accounting standards boards. So they give you a frame and suggest indicators that the listed companies, the companies that are listed on the US Stock Exchange should disclose in their annual report. And here, Vegan Finance and maybe other companies, we have suggested to include this animal-related criteria in the investment decision. So in 2018, they have included in the meat and poultry dairy sector some indicators for animal welfare: the percentage of pork produced without the use of gestation crates, percentage of cage-free shell egg cells, percentage of production certified to a third-party animal welfare standard. This is not compulsory. This is what we call the soft law. So it's a recommendation, but the more and more companies will adopt this good practice, and the more and more companies will follow. So and one day it will be integrated in the law. So the first step is that we have some leaders to include this, I mean corporate companies to include this criteria, and investors to include these animal criteria, and the SASB, which is working with the FASB, has included this criteria. And our mission is also, I mean, the mission of Vegan Finance or over any vegan company or the public is to influence them when we are asking, when we are sending some public consultation to go to answer to these consultations you can have online. This is for the United States. And for the European Union, there were a public consultation recently about the SFDR regulation. It means the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation. It means what do you have to disclose when you are an asset manager or an institutional investors. And if you look at the drafts, you don't find any animal-related criteria. And here, Vegan Finance and maybe other companies or organizations have suggested to include animal criteria, but it's good that they have sent public consultation, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Thank you. That was very informative.
You are welcome.
Okay, no more questions. It's fine. So we are going to have a small break.